Welcome to SmithWeekly Discussions, an occasional program for our members of SmithWeekly Research. Please note this program is a private discussion and everything contained herein is for entertainment and educational purposes only. With that, we hope you're in a comfortable position, along with your favorite beverage, to enjoy the discussion. We remind our audience to examine our show notes attached to each of our shows to better understand how our program functions. Before we get into our discussion today, we want to say thanks for questions coming from our audience at SmithWeekly, including Paul M., Jeff S., Dave V., and Todd A. On the program today, we've got a new guest and company joining us. Mr. Jason Bontempo is on the podcast. Jason is the Chief Executive Officer and Director of Gladiator Metals, a Yukon Canada-focused copper explorer and project developer, advancing the Whitehorse copper project, which has multiple prospect areas, including the company's cornerstone Cowley Park prospect that has recent expansion discoveries off a historic mineral resource and past copper production areas. To the northwest of Cowley Park, other prospects include Little Chief, Middle Chief, and Arctic Chief. Gladiator Metals also has gold exploration exposure in Australia with its Coonamberry North project in New South Wales. Gladiator Metals is listed on the Toronto Venture Exchange under the symbol GLAD, as well as on the US OTC markets under the symbol GDTRF. Mr. Bontempo, welcome to SmithWeekly Discussions.
Good evening, Andrew.
Good to have you on. And of course, Jason, you are new to the podcast. And as usual, for our audience who's listening in here, some of the audience doesn't know who you are. As such, why don't we start off here by you giving us your background and experience in the junior natural resource sector?
Yeah, sure, Andrew. Look, I've been involved in junior exploration now for over 20 years, almost 25 years. I started life out as a chartered accountant at Ernst & Young, and working in Perth. The minerals and resources industry is a major sector. It's not hard to end up in the exploration and development world down here. And so I've been essentially either on the board, advising, establishing, founding junior companies in the minerals and resources sector. In fact, Gladiator Metals was set up for that very reason. It was founded and established to look for the next amazing exploration opportunity. That was in 2021. And so here we are, finding our way on the next project.
Excellent, Jason. Appreciate that. And of course, the focus metals of the company in general here, the two main focus metals are, of course, copper first and then gold second. How do you look at the copper and gold market today in terms of the market events you've seen coming into 2025, as well as investor sentiment for exploration companies in Canada?
I'll speak to copper. It's a very different macro situation to gold for many reasons. But in regards to copper, I've been focused on copper since probably since 2019, 2020. The reality is that the energy transition sector is bringing a whole new future demand for the metal. And at the moment, the industry consumes 18 to 19 million tons of metal per annum, whichever data generator you look at. But moving forward and into the future, that's expected to grow significantly to 30 to 40 million tons. And copper is actually quite rare, believe it or not. I mean, you've got the big companies that mine the big bulk tonnage deposits at the low grade, and I think that tells you a lot. I think the average grade these days for a mine is anywhere between 0.3 to 0.5% per ton of rock, and historically 30 years ago it would have been over 1%. In fact, the Whitehorse copper project, which was a previous producer under Hudbay Minerals, it produced at 1.5% copper. So with a declining grade and not a lot of significant investment in copper exploration, we can see that squeeze coming. And I'd been looking for a while, and when I was reacquainted with the Whitehorse copper project, I jumped on it. So there's I mentioned earlier, there's obviously the bulk tonnage, low grade type of mines, porphyry mines. but the high grade deposits are actually quite rare. They're not as easy to find, and so we think exploring the Whitehorse Copper Belt is very much a privilege because they're very hard to come across. And we can see that there's going to be an attraction in copper where being in a first tier jurisdiction such as Canada, being on the high grade category of project, which means a lower capital intensity to get going, and also surrounded by infrastructure, which would place it in a very unique position, given or compared to where larger companies are having to make billions of dollars of capital investment to get a project started.
It's an interesting jurisdiction, and there's definitely quite a mineral endowment. Of course, to the south there, British Columbia, quite a copper province as well, and very large projects down there that have capex, as you said, there in the billion area. Jason, with that, give us a brief overview of the company. Gladiator essentially started in 2021. Just talk about that history leading up to now.
So I established or founded Gladiator Metals, yes, in 2021, and soon went on the search for a high quality project. Now, the history is that, in fact, I was reacquainted with the Whitehorse Copper Project in late 21, early 2022 by our now president and chief geologist, Marcus Harden. It was very interesting because I had been to Whitehorse back in 2007 and looking at the Whitehorse Copper Project. So when I learned that it was still available, it was much to my surprise, and I jumped on it. Now the history is that I was active. I was the managing director at the time of an ASX listed company called Tianshan Goldfields, and we were advancing a large sort of bulk tonnage, low grade gold deposit in northwest China. And the drillers on that project, who had been our drillers for a good 3 years, Jim and Rob Coyne, who run and own Kluane Drilling. And Kluane Drilling and the Coyne family are based in Whitehorse. And it was back then that they had highlighted to me the Whitehorse Copper Belt. And I flew to Whitehorse in 07. I had a good look. Back then, the project, which essentially is a 35-kilometre strike by sort of 5 kilometres wide in terms of project area or covering the Whitehorse Copper Belt. It runs along the western margin of Whitehorse City. Back then, the Coynes had or controlled maybe a third of that 35 kilometres, but there were other vendors. And so I worked really hard to sort of try and bring the deal together under one roof. And then, of course, in June 2008, we hit the global financial crisis. And the IPO that I'd planned onto the Australian Stock Exchange never went ahead. So 15 years later, to come across Jim and Rob Coyne, and this time around, the project was 100% within their control and ownership. They had steadily worked along and aggregated and brought together the whole belt. And I was very excited. This time around, I'd asked Marcus if he would go and do some due diligence at the project. And this was in April of 2022. And after about 5 or 6 weeks, Marcus came back and had essentially focused at Cowley Park, where there was boxes and boxes of records, old drill records that had collected dust, never digitized. And so we spent the time doing that, and we looked at it and sort of did a quick model, and we could see that there was what looked like to us at a high level of at least a starting 15 to 20 million tons at 1.5% copper from surface, and by no means that's not a 43-101 resource at all. That's just us digitizing old drill hole data, which was a feat in itself. And as soon as we saw that, we went, oh wow, let's go. This is fantastic. That's a great start. But it also highlighted just the potential of the whole belt. So came to an agreement very quickly with Jim and Rob Coyne, and I shouldn't say very quickly. They did take some time, but we got there by November 2022, and we were on the ground drilling in March of 2023. Back then, Marcus had sort of highlighted the initial potential at Cowley Park. From my perspective, I had always used this rule of thumb with copper that if you're 10 million tonnes at plus 1% from surface, you've got yourself a starting mine. And interestingly enough, Little Chief, which was the focus of production when there was production at the Whitehorse Copper Belt between 1967 and 1982 by Hudbay, they produced 10.5 million tonnes at 1.5% and almost a gram gold. So it was a very good mine. And the bulk of those 10 million tonnes, 8.5 of them came from the Little Chief deposit, which was open pit into underground. And so, as a rule of thumb, it was a great start at Cowley. And then I asked Marcus, I said, well, what's the potential of the belt? That's when, after reviewing the other prospects along the belt, we could see that certainly the Whitehorse Copper Project could deliver over 100 million tonnes from surface at that sort of plus 1% grade, which would be phenomenal. And so away we went. We thought, let's go. Let's see if we can uncover the potential of the belt. I think the point is, Andrew, is that when it was operated by Hudbay, they were very busy, mining and tonnes to the mill. And essentially what they did is the bulk of the tonnes came from one small deposit. However, what they did do is along the belt, wherever they could see outcropping copper mineralization or skarn mineralization, they would sort of very closely spaced drill it and try and get those tonnes to the mill. But in essence, what they were doing was almost running the initial exploration program along the belt, because all they were really doing was looking at what was showing itself at surface. And what Hudbay never really focused on was sort of rising above the project in all these 3 or 4 or 5 different more advanced priority exploration targets, and ask the question, how much is there? What is actually here? And that was never done. So in 1982, when they suffered a pretty significant copper price shock, I think it halved after the third oil price shock, they rehabilitated, cleaned up, and left and moved over to the Flin Flon area. And the project essentially has remained dormant just over 40 years until we got involved. And what's really interesting is Gladiator Metals ownership or work is now the first time in that 40 years that there's been a dedicated technical team and also dedicated funding for the project. The Coyne family, Jim and Rob Coyne, did a wonderful job maintaining it, bringing it along. They did small amounts of work where they would use it for training or a little bit of scratching and exploration, but nothing like the work we're doing now to really test the size of this project.
Jason, good background. Good to see how it came together. It's an interesting area. It's in a good location. Certainly, it's among some pretty large development projects that are already discovered out there and are advancing. I want to get into the project and talk a little more detail here in a minute, but just before we do, I just want to cover off the capital structure for the audience. Go through the shares on issue here, Jason, the current cash on hand, as well as the major shareholders, including yourself and management.
Yeah, so look, we currently have 79 million shares on issue, fully diluted. We're out to almost 95 million shares. You do need to add on 11 million shares as a vendor payment to the coins, which are not due for another another 3 and then 4 years. And that's part of the earning. So look, fully diluted, our market cap would be around 50 million, and we currently have about $15 million in cash treasury, which is fully funding our exploration program this year. Very attractively priced for our plans until the end of the year. Up until recently, it was essentially, very much strongly held with insiders, with directors and management, and I'd sort of been actively doing some fund rounds with high net worths. But more recently, we've gained the attention of some significant institutional shareholders, including Mackenzie out of Toronto, Dynamic out of Toronto. So very much resource specialist institutional funds. And then also out of Australia, we have Arimco and Macquarie Bank Mining and Metals. And Arimco and Macquarie Bank are very, very technical investors. And even for me personally, them very much doing their technical due diligence on the project. I think it was the third time that we'd been to Macquarie, and we finally won them over. And not because there was anything wrong with the projects to begin with. It's just that we'd advanced them with more information. Very, very proud to say that these type of highly regarded technical investment institutional funds are now invested in Gladiator, and hoping now that I'm driven to deliver the copper resources that they believe are at the Whitehorse Copper Project.
Certainly a lot of those are some industry names. Good to see that they have invested in the company as well, and that they have a good piece of the equity to enjoy some of this exploration upside that could be coming down the pipeline here, and has already been demonstrated in recent news, which we'll get to in just a moment. On budget, the company's last financing was in December, if memory serves here, where you guys did about 12.6 million Canadian oversubscribed placement there. With the current exploration program expenses, Jason, what is your guys' outlook as far as how capital carries the company before the need to do another equity financing again?
We're planning approximately 30,000 metres for the calendar year 2025. We're almost about soon hitting 10,000 metres. So our budget really until the end of the year would leave us most likely at around $3 or $4 million right at the end of the year. But the thing is that this program has two catalysts for value. One is that the drilling that we're doing now, particularly at Cowley Park, should and put us in good stead to deliver an independently verified 4311 exploration target in the third quarter of this year. And that really will be the first time that we can talk about the potential tonnage and grade at Cowley, and that should order of magnitude, in my opinion, give the market a really good feel for valuation at that point. The other catalyst is working towards our engagement with our First Nations, and in particular Kwanlundun First Nation, of whose traditional lands we lie within, along with the Tarn. We hope to be working on our second agreement with them and delivering that in the third quarter of this year also. And I think between those two items, they would be significant value catalysts. And look, by that point, we will still be significantly funded. We will have around $8 or $9 million still left in the bank, and being able to deploy that till the end of the year. So, I would say that for us, it's more about delivering those two catalysts, and that's when we would look for a financing again, because we would expect a re-rating of value.
That's a good position to be in, and planning that way, certainly. And with the exploration program here, so far, some of the results are looking good. And so I expect that would probably be the case here as you guys proceed through the rest of the drill program. I know you covered off some of the key folks already. Is there anybody else on the staff that you wanted to mention, and what they bring to the table as far as, the project and the company?
Yeah, sure. I mean, look, Marcus, I mentioned already, lots of wonderful experience as a principal geologist. In particular, he was at First Quantum, which everyone knows is a very copper-focused company. Kel Nielsen has a huge amount of experience in exploration. He is also based in Whitehorse along with Marcus. So I'm very pleased that our president and our VP of exploration are actually based in Whitehorse, advancing the project. Olav Langelier comes from an excellent background in Canadian capital markets, but also, as a mining engineer also, and sort of brings that expertise of now where we sort of begin to start moving from exploration, putting resources on the books and moving into advancing to studies on those resources. The rest of the board's based in Vancouver. Everyone's in Vancouver. In fact, I'm the only one you're either in Vancouver or Whitehorse, except for me, and that was primarily because of my relationship with the coins, and that's how I've sort of, why I'm calling and speaking to you from Australia, because it was my relationship with the coins, and therefore once I got started and raising capital, I suddenly became inextricably linked and connected. But no, very very happy with a wonderful management team based in Vancouver and Whitehorse.
Jason, thank you for that. Good to mention some of those other folks, and it's obviously very important to have some folks right there nearby the project, not far away there in Whitehorse. Okay, recent drilling results. Some results have come out during May and also during April. Just talk a little bit about some of those results that have come out so far from the program, and then just talk a little bit more about what you expect to come out of the exploration program running into the summer to finish up for this phase.
We'll briefly step back towards the end of last year, and I think it's important to mention it because in the fourth quarter of last year, we wanted to drill 4 lines of drilling over at Cowley. The advanced component of Cowley Park was over a sort of 700 meter to 300 meter strike. In the fourth quarter of last year, we did 4 lines of drilling. We wanted to really get a feel for Cowley stacking up on the historical results, and that was very successful. And from that program, you will see the results at the end of the year show that what we can see is the beginnings of what potentially could be a significant maiden resource envelope, and that's what these 4 lines gave us. Subsequent to that, now we recommenced drilling at the end of February of 2025. We had a 10,000 meter program at Cowley Park. We are approximately, I'd say, 6,500 meters in to that. We still have another 3,500 over the next few weeks to drill. But yes, the results that we've been putting out of late are showing, what they're really showing is some pretty fantastic widths and high grade within that Cowley Park envelope that we are chasing. And in particular, what we're seeing is a very high grade core at Cowley within a broader envelope. So we're thinking that we have potentially looking at a maiden delivery of 40 to 50 million tonnes at plus 1% copper from surface. Now, to put it into perspective, if we are to deliver that at the end of the year, when you look globally around the world, that would put Cowley Park under that criteria of plus 40 million tonnes, plus 1% copper, and from surface into what we would regard as a world-class category. What we can see at the moment are maybe only 4 deposits where they're plus 40 million tonnes, plus 1% grade from surface. And one of them's in Afghanistan, and the owner of that is the Taliban. So good luck on the Afghanistan Stock Exchange investing in that one. But also the other 3, one's in the DRC. We have the Arctic project in Alaska, and then San Nicolas in Mexico. So for us to deliver on those categories, that would put the Cowley Park deposit alone within this wonderful 35-kilometre long belt in a world-class category. And that's what gets us really excited. But within that, the results that we've been releasing over the last 3-4 weeks are showing that even within that broader envelope, there is the potential of a very high grade core. And this is what's captured us now. And we're really focused on really testing just how big and how high grade this high grade core, which is shallow subsurface, anywhere from 50 to 150 meters, this high grade core is sitting within, which is very shallow for 3, 4, 5, 8% copper grades over 15 to 25 meters in width. Is pretty phenomenal. Sort of some of our investors have been calling me and making the point that they don't really see this potential or this width and grade other than in the Congo from this depth and from surface. So it's really interesting, and we are currently now doing more drilling into chasing the extent, whether it be out east, out west. Interestingly, also very much down dip as well. So lots of interesting times coming over the next couple of months with the drilling that we're doing right now, testing this high grade core.
This is a very good set of results, in my opinion, so far coming here. Looking forward to seeing the maiden resource figures come out when you guys get to that. I suspect that'll be sometime in the next 12 months. That'll hit. With that, go back to Hudbay for a moment and talk about what Hudbay left as far as historic resource, historic results, and how you guys have been able to also integrate that into how you guys are looking at this project.
As I had previously mentioned, the company Hudbay had mined successfully from 1967 to 1982. It certainly was a major boom for Whitehorse City at that time. It was the major employer. It was essentially huge growth time for Whitehorse City off the back of the production and the mine from Hudbay. In fact, there is still a lot of crew, a lot of old timers, a lot of community in Whitehorse where it was either your mum, your dad, your uncle, your cousin, someone worked on the mine, and both, and including a number of our First Nations as well, particularly at the Kwanlin Dun. A number of the elders worked at the mine, and it's interesting talking to them how they talk about the wonderful skills that they gained and the very good standard of living that they had at the time. But Hudbay had primarily focused at the Little Chief mine. Little Chief was started from open pit, went underground. As it got underground, it got higher in grade. It was moving from 1 and 2%, where some of the drill results and intersects from 200 and 300 meters deep. Where it went underground, the intercepts were reporting 40, 50, 60 meters at 4 to 6% copper. Really interesting deposit, and also had decent gold as a credit. I mean, it was almost a gram a ton, and they didn't really learn or understand the gold until they started seeing a couple of mine employees driving around in flash new cars and couldn't understand how they could afford them, and realized there was some gold falling out at the end of the the pipes at the mill. so that's how they discovered the gravity gold, and then obviously put a circuit in to start capturing it. So it was really interesting. Although the majority of tons came from Little Chief, as I said, they did explore up and down the belt, mostly to the south, down to Cowley. So from between Cowley Park and Little Chief is, I'd say, 15 to 20 kilometres in that range, and along that belt and strike of the belt, they would come across outcropping skarn, and it was very high grade, and they would closely space drill it and rip it out and send it to the mill. And but they never really stood back and decided, hey, what have we got here? And in fact, to be fair, they sort of started doing that with Cowley, because there were some tons mined from surface at Cowley. There is a small pit there, so we know that it processed and concentrated, and from a metallurgical point of view, in regards to historic mining, anyway, not from testing that we've done. I think Cowley was going to be the next cab off the rank, and they just stopped when the copper price crashed. And what it really did is left an opportunity. I think there was something like 200. They drilled 200 holes, and these were the holes that we found in boxes collecting dust. And because they'd never been digitized, you didn't have any transparency of seeing through, in fact, really what the potential of Cowley Park is. And I'd say there was a number of opportune entrepreneurs that would have looked at the Whitehorse Copper Project in that dormant 40 years, because the data was wasn't digitized and wasn't easily able to be reviewed. I think a lot of people missed the potential, and it was only because of Marcus's curiosity and his love as a fine geologist. He spent the time painstakingly digitizing that data, and that's when we could see wow, what a wonderful potential Cowley Park had. But also, moreover, those 200 holes, what we've discovered since we've started drilling ourselves and confirming some of them is that Hud Bay would only selectively sample. In other words, they would only assay for copper where they visually thought was high grade. They did not sample or assay the whole of hole. And when we started doing that, we started realizing that the full widths of what we were drilling, the anywhere from from 30, 40 meters to 100 meters of intercept was actually mineralized, and mineralized with copper that would be as high as 1% around those high grade components, which run from anywhere from, I guess, 1% to 8 or 9%, as high as 13 and 14%, in fact. So what we found is there was a lot more copper in a broader based envelope potential than Hud Bay probably originally thought. And then you add to that we also assayed for multi-element. And what we're finding is a very high grade component of molybdenum as well, where we're in the sort of anywhere from 0.1 to 0.3 of a percent, which is quite high grade for moly. And then with silver as a background, and now more recently, we're starting to intersect some pretty fantastic high grade gold. You might see from some of the recent releases, we are reporting up to 0.7 gram a ton gold over decent widths, and even some gold intercepts from surface that are standalone gold intercepts. I think we intercepted almost 6 meters at 8 grams a ton from 10 meters on a recent drill hole. So, um, I guess Hud Bay never really focused or spent the time, as I say, stepping back, rising above, and asking the question: what is here? What is that? What is the size? What is the right size of what's actually here? They were very much in a production mindset of let's get tons to the mill, and so that's how it was back then. That's what they were focused on. It was all about getting an earnings per share for the share price. Very different model to an exploration company who needs to show the potential of the ground, and that's how share price is driven, and that's what we're doing right now.
Absolutely, Jason. Yeah, some of the gold hits recently have been quite good, and certainly an interesting project here and quite a history as well. And definitely there's more there as you guys are showing up here. So it looks like at Cowley, it looks like you guys will be in the years ahead here, will be working on exploration. Could be accelerated depending on what you guys see there and what you hit. So there's a lot of work yet to come, and definitely future drill programs down the pipe here into 2026. With that, is there any other work that you guys plan to do? The maiden resource estimate will come out. Some of the other prospects to the northwest on, of course, the Whitehorse project area. Any other work that you guys plan to do up at some of the chief prospects, or is Cowley going to be 100% the focus for now because of what you guys are hitting?
We are most definitely focused on Cowley. We have 2 rigs at Cowley as we speak, drilling the inner resource potential of that high grade core and extensions, but also magnetic gradient extensions where we see potential of the size of Cowley becoming even larger. But I'm really pleased to say that we also have a 3rd rig now commencing up at those further north prospects. So in terms of the belt, we have Cowley Park, about 3 kilometres away. We have the Cub Trend, which was another area where Hud Bay had scraped some tons off at surface, very, very small. And then as you move north, we got what we call the Chiefs Trend, which within the Chiefs Trend is the old Little Chief deposit, which by no means is closed off in terms of its size and potential. The only reason it shut down was because the copper price crashed and Hud Bay decided to walk away. But it is certainly open along strike and down depth, and it's joined by Middle Chief and Big Chief. So within that, we call that the Chief's Trend. And we proved up last year with some drilling at Middle Chief, where there is what looks to be a significant resource underground that remained unmined. We don't know why it was unmined. Obviously the Hud Bay didn't get to it when the copper price moved. But we see a lot of potential along that strike of Little Chief, Middle Chief, and Big Chief, which together forms a Chief's Trend. So we've got a rig starting there shortly. So we'll have a third drill rig going. And then we're very excited about the Arctic Chief's Trend. And within Arctic Chief Trend, that's a good 2.5 kilometre trend where from Arctic Chief up to Best Chance and Grafter, we see a huge amount of potential. Once again, Hud Bay, same thing. They focused on surface expressions of scar mineralization, quickly, closely spaced drilled, mined it, and never went back to test the size and potential of what lies beneath. So we are most definitely going to be working the Chief's Trend, the Arctic Chief Trend, and they're the ones that we can see that are obvious. We've done a significant amount of geophysics along the belt, and we can see a number of anomalies from that geophysics works that is highlighting anything from as far north as Best Chance on this southern portion, I'd say, right down to well south of Little Chief, which is quite a long range. That would be a good 7 to 10 kilometre range along there. So not just what Hud Bay expressed at surface, but also what lies beneath we'll be testing. And this is why not only are we wanting to move Cowley Park to its maiden resource in the first quarter of next year, but we also want to be able to show where the next resources will come from, and that's why we will most definitely be advancing these areas, and we're funded to do so, Andrew. We've got a significant cash balance, and that's where our investors want the money to go is in the ground, and tell us what you got. And so that's what we're going to do. We're going to have a lot of fun doing it. And we also, even further north, have another area called the Hat Trend, which is certainly another interesting area that we will want to test. We've got some news coming out on that shortly, in fact, that your listeners will be able to read about.
Thank you for that. So it sounds pretty good here. You guys will be doing a few other things in parallel to, of course, Cowley. It sounds like a lot of different things coming, and also news events happening here as well as far as results. Jason, talk generally about Yukon as a jurisdiction, not only for exploration, but also from a mine development production standpoint. Would you say it's one of the better provinces in Canada? And, how is doing business there? Is it difficult? Just talk a little bit about Yukon.
The Yukon is blessed, absolutely blessed with resources. You might have seen, over the last 24 months, Snowline Gold Corp has made a significant discovery, gold discovery, which is just enormous. I think they'll be pushing over 10 million ounces there, which is amazing. You've got a number of other companies that are advancing projects, including Western Copper and Gold with the Casino project. You've got Sitka Gold with their exploration project is doing quite well. Banyan Gold are advancing their gold project. Fireweed has recently had a major investment from the Lundin Group and is certainly advancing that Mac Pass project, which is more zinc and base metals rather than copper. BMC Minerals with their Kudzekai project is just an amazing base metals project as well. So lots of projects that are in that development phase. They recently, the Yukon recently had its concerns and issues with the Victoria gold mine, and it has probably created a little bit of uncertainty, but certainly it was a mine that can certainly be brought back into production, and I've got no doubt that it'll solve its issues there. Hecla Mining are already, they are an existing miner at Keno Hill Mine. So for us doing business, we're very much focused, because we're so close to Whitehorse City. We spend a lot of time with our community engagement. We find that there is a significant community of mineral resources mining community that are very interestingly watching what's happening at the project, because I think the idea of being able to work at an exploration project and maybe even one day a mining project, and then hop in your car and you're home in 30 minutes and you can take the kids to hockey practice, has a lot of appeal. And so, we get a lot of support from the local community in terms of the potential of wanting to know what the potential is of the Whitehorse Copper project. The Yukon government have been very supportive of us exploring. They've been, very good with us receiving our drilling permits. We've been operating under Class 1 with no issues. The Whitehorse City Council has also been very supportive. A number of Cowley Park lies outside of the city boundaries, but a number of our prospects lie within the city boundaries. And we've got a very good relationship with the City Council now, where we work with them on obtaining development permits. And we've been obtaining development permits now on a number of the prospects. We just recently achieved another one for the third rig that's going up to Little Chief. So our engagement has been very fluid and transparent. Haven't had any issues operating over the last 2 years. And then we come to our First Nations, the Kwanlundun First Nation. We're quite advanced in discussions with them. We signed a capacity funding agreement with them in October last year. The proximity of Cowley, because it's the most advanced area, it's very proximal to Kwanlundun settlement areas, and so we've been dealing very closely with them and engaged very much. We work very closely with the Kwanlundun, and they've been very supportive, and they too also are very keen to understand the resource potential that lies within their traditional lands. This is the sole resource project that's within their traditional land. So for us, the operating environment has been very positive. The Yukon does have obviously, concerned citizens is probably the best way to put it, and they're constantly making themselves heard, not just within Whitehorse, but across the whole province, making sure and that the industry is working to the regulations and ensuring that the environment is being respected. So we're always dealing with that. That'll always be there, Andrew. I think anywhere you go in the world, you've got interested and concerned followers of projects. But we work and engage as much as we can with everybody. We're constantly and consistently engaging with community. We have open houses. We present at city council meetings regularly. Whatever we can do to keep the community updated as to our work, listening to their concerns. We've adjusted our exploration operating procedures where we've taken on advice. So I think that the environment for us in the Yukon has been very good, and that's because we are very transparent and engaged. There is an election coming up in October in the Yukon, so I think generally that between both parties, they're very supportive of mining. Premier Range, who's now stepping down, has been a very vocal supporter of advancing the mining industry, and I think you'll find now that the Yukon party as well, with Curry Dixon, are also very supportive of mining and sustainable and responsible mining development as well. And I think that's the potential of the Yukon. I mean, they are a territory within Canada, and they do receive a lot of federal funding. But I think a number of Yukoners want to become more standalone and independent with their industry, and also because there's such a wonderful labour resource and skills and experience of in the community to work within. So for us, it's been very good. We're really pleased to be there. It's our access is amazing. We can access the project all year round. We're only 2 to 3 kilometres off the Alaskan highway. It's only a short flight, 2-hour flight, direct flights with Air North from Vancouver. It's a very accessible project for us.
Jason, thank you for going through that. It's been an interesting jurisdiction for sure, and I think first of all, if you do the work right, you can advance a project. Yeah, it's going to come with challenges, but if you do it right, you can advance a project forward. I do think that would be the case, and then historically and also into the future, Yukon can't rely upon federal government subsidies to support the province. You have to have a healthy mining industry in Yukon. I think when you would look at the economics of that province, you would have to say that would be a key feature for the advancement of the province. from a wealth perspective, job perspective, economics, being a healthy province. So certainly some interesting things you brought up there. You mentioned before, we talked a little bit about size before and where you guys stand as a company here as far as the deposit area, and of course, Cowley Park. We also had a few comparables. We talked about the Middle East, we talked about other parts of the Americas. But when you look at peers, let's say in BC and Yukon, for example, or Western Canada, projects that are either in production or in late mining, permitting stages, what have you, what do you think in terms of size and production profile of a primary copper project would you see that would really attract a major and that would drive it into a production decision? Just talk a little bit about that and how you see in that area what you guys think you need to achieve to get that major to look really hard at Gladiator.
Look, I think the first step will be delivering our 43101 maiden resource in the first quarter of next year. That's based on really seeing what the outcome of this drilling is going to be over the next 3 to 6 months. Because, Andrew, if we see Cowley Park is continuing to grow and not quite right sized yet, then we'll keep going. I don't think we necessarily have to wrap some boundaries around it. If we see a very solid 40 to 50 million tons, if we can prove what we think is there, then that would be quite a significant start for that belt. For instance, if there's 40 to 50 million tons at surface above 1%, and to be honest, I'm being conservative above 1%, because if this high grade core continues, it's more appropriate to say 1 to 2% copper. Then you add on the credits. And plus, if we show the potential, even at 2 or 3 other areas up the belt, there's no question that the Whitehorse Copper Project could be a multi-decade operation. If you want to work off 2 to 3 million tons per annum processing, over the stretch of 15 to 20 kilometres, with all that infrastructure in place, a draw on a wonderful labour resource in Whitehorse City. And if we are successful in bringing together our social licence with our First Nations and the Yukon government and the broader Whitehorse community, I think it's going to be a hugely attractive option, for a major. If you think about the fact, if we could show 40 to 50,000 tons of metal per annum, well, look, that's 10% of what I think Canada produces as a whole. I think Canada's contribution is around 500,000 tons of metal per annum in production, and being 10% of that would be really impressive. And I think as a bolt-on to some of the mid-tier producers, it would be a significant addition. In some cases, a 20% increase in metal production, which is material. How do we see it? I mean, that could be what comes to the fore. It really depends. I think this is a big year of drilling for us. 30,000 meters will tell us a lot more by the end of the year. When you look at market caps of companies that are more advanced, that are either completed their feasibility or they're into development, for our mining, have an over $1 billion market cap, where they have been reporting, initially 40 million tons at 2%, copper. I think Marimaca Copper is another great comparison to look to, in the sense of they are much more advanced, but they are capped at, I think, around 500 million, and I'm pretty sure there's a really attractive 40 million tons at a plus 1% core within their resource. So if we can bring the company to that next stage at the end of this year, then and start moving towards studies and making sure that we're bringing the social license along for permitting, then there's no reason why the company cannot move or be re-rated from its 50 or 60 mil market cap, up to a 200, 300, 400 mil market cap, to reflect the value of the copper in the ground.
I think those are the key items, and looking forward to seeing how you guys progress that here in the coming months. We should get more information on that front as to the direction. Okay, I want to shift just briefly over to Australia, just get your thoughts there as far as the Coonamberry North project exploration. Is this project something you guys are going to keep in the portfolio? Any plans there, or is this something that will maybe be monetized in the future?
I'd be just focusing on us being monetizing it in the future. Our sole focus is the Whitehorse copper project, Andrew. That's where all the attention and the funds will be attributed to.
Well, Jason, short of any other comments that you wanted to add, I think we'll go ahead and wrap it up there. Before we do, though, I want to ask you one of our final questions here. For potential investors who are listening in, Gladiator Metals has a market capitalization of about 41 million Canadian dollars. Why should the company be considered within the institutional, family office, and retail investors' portfolio at this stage?
Well, we already are with our with our current institutional holdings, and I think that pays testament to the quality of the project. And I think if you're a family office institution wanting exposure to copper in the ground, but also with a combination of leverage as well, where we're moving from that advanced exploration into reporting copper resource inventory, then Gladiator Metals and the Whitehorse Copper Project should certainly be a contender in your analysis for that exposure. And to add to that, we are actually funded. We're fully funded. There is no need to be raising money from financing. So to be able to get exposure to the company from the drilling that we're doing, the active almost 20,000 meters to go, you're going to have to buy the stock on market on market, Andrew. So there's a number of reasons. Paying testament to the quality of the project from our institutional holdings already is a big one.
Jason, for investors seeking further information, how can they reach the company?
Yes, you can reach the company. We do have our contact details on our website. You can get through on the info email. So we always see them and respond. So it won't be a problem.
Well, thank you very much for the introduction to Gladiator Metals. Keep up the efforts on further discovery and, of course, project advancement. We look forward to having you back maybe later this year to update.
Thanks, Andrew. It's been great. Thank you very much.